I start walking down the stairs with the trash from the 4th floor to the bottom, when a lady from the 3rd floor walks out with a trash bag. I briefly walk past, just finishing my day, when she scoffs at me. I turn around to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. I didn't mean to bump into you," and continue down, and then she says, "Here, take this. I got a call I need to get on." I told her I was sorry, I didn't work for the building, and it's not my job to take it. So then she exclaims, "You are dressed like a janitor. My son is one too. You dress just like him. He has the same tools on him all day." Now, I tried to tell her that I'm not a janitor and that I'm a plumber, working above her on the 4th floor. I start to get annoyed, but I just remembered that I need to take breaths and walk away. I told her I can't, and then I start going down the stairs when she grabs the back of my hoodie and yanks it. I spun around like, what the heck? And she slams the bag into my stomach, sending me stumbling down the stairs. This was when one of her coworkers comes out because of the commotion, and this woman starts fake crying, saying that I was the biggest creep ever trying to grope her as I walked past her, and that she had shoved me down the stairs in an attempt to save herself. Now, I tried to say something getting up, but the person was on the phone with the cops already, and he took her away to calm her down. I start to get so mad at this woman, but then my coworker comes up to me and says everything's gonna be okay. And this is when one of the biggest blessings ever occurred. So my buddy loves to mess with me. He'd take videos of me working or being oblivious, and then he'd throw coins at me to be funny, or dump water on me as a joke to lighten the day up a bit. So I guess he heard the interaction and thought it would be funny to record me getting mistaken as a janitor. He records the interaction and the lady never knew he was there. We hung around and obviously waited for the cops to come so I could defend myself. They talk to the woman and they take her side at first. They then start asking me questions in the stairwell, and my buddy said he witnessed it and had a video. He then began to show the video to the cop, and lucky he had everything recorded, from the moment I began down the stairs to the part where the lady shoves me down the stairs. The police talks to her, and from the second he said there was a video, she turns ghost white. They took her downstairs to the cruiser, and the cop comes back to me asking if I needed assistance or an ambulance, as I had a gash on my elbow. I was totally fine though, just in complete shock. He also asked if I wanted to press charges, and I told him I would. In the following time since this happened, I've taken her to court, and she's been charged and is serving time for assault and battery and another thing that I don't recall. What's important to know, as I'm realizing now, is that there were no cameras in the stairwell. I could have been screwed. I could have been absolutely screwed. I'm so glad my friend recorded me, as I could be sitting in jail serving time for something I didn't do. Lucky my buddy was there, and ever since then, I have never complained once about him messing around with me. Shortly after this, the building installs new cameras everywhere. Guys, what a terrifying situation to be in. Being mistaken as an employee and then having it go from 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds. Guys, I'm absolutely speechless. Like, if this psycho lady can say something as outrageous as that for OP not taking out her garbage, imagine what else she could be doing out there. Or has done out there. Thank goodness OP's friend was there to record him, and thank goodness that he pressed charges, and she's now serving some time for that. Holy crap. So I was on my way home after a very long day of working at the hospital. As much as I would have rather just kept driving, the gas light was lit up on my dash and told me to stop being lazy and to just fill the tank. After hopping off the highway, I head for the small station that I frequently use. It only has 2 pumps. Even though it has great prices, I rarely have to wait more than a car or two for an open spot, and the road is pretty much empty nearby. The station was on my right side, so I turned right to get in. As I begin to turn the wheel into the station, this lunatic in a Mercedes comes up from the other direction. She cuts in through the outlane and inches across my front bumper to beat me into the parking lot. I slam my brakes, sending my gym bag and stack of folders shooting off the passenger seat into a jumbled mess on the floor. Now, I'm not a big fan of cuss words, but that had me cussing like a sailor. As I pull in, I notice a police car in the parking spot outside the building that houses the cashier and the tiny convenience store. My hopes rose as I prayed the officers saw the crazy lady stunt, and I was about to witness some instant karma. No such luck though. She pulled to one side of the pumps. I pull into the other. I get out, swipe my card, and start the gas flowing. Then, clear as a bell, I hear the snottiest sounding voice issuing from the Mercedes. She says, "This is unbelievable. I was clearly here first, but this idiot is filling up the other car first. No, he hasn't even come up to my car yet. I swear, these people are so stupid out here. Hold on, Shelly. I have to deal with this moron, or I'll be here all day." So now the dreaded "excuse me" is aimed right at me. She says, "You know, you don't need to wait for the tank to be full before you start another car, right? Now come here and take this." She said that as she wags a credit card at me. She then says, "If I'm late because of you, I will be calling your boss. And just so you know, it's very rude to serve customers out of order. I was here ahead of that guy." I look down and sure enough, she has a New Jersey plate. So in New Jersey, you don't pump your own gas. An attendant does it for you. My state may have a few full service stations left, but honestly, I haven't seen one in ages. Here, you pump for yourself. If she had gotten out of her car, she would have seen that I was that guy, but the pump blocked her line of sight. Now, I did consider an "I don't work here" style response, but the primped up, entitled expression on the self-absorbed woman required a little bit more from me. So at this point, she stares hard at me, raising her eyebrows and waggled the card even more emphatically. Before I knew what to do, I let go of my pump, stepped closer, and took the card from her manicured fingers. As she sneered at me, I looked her right in the eyes and snapped my hand downward, flinging her card straight into the trash beside the pump. Now, someone must have thrown away a slushie or a milkshake in there because the card makes an awesome splat sound hitting the bottom. And she screams. This made the thought of sorting all the files on the floor of my car almost worth it. Now, it could have stopped there, and I would have happily driven away with my half-full tank, but no, it was not over yet. She was screaming obscenities at me as I turned away, completely losing her mind. And that's when the officer comes dashing out of the store and says, "Excuse me, miss, are you okay? What's going on?" This woman then says, "This man assaulted me and stole my card. He threw it in there." She says that stabbing a 3-inch long nail at the barrel. The officer says, "Is that correct, sir?" I told him barely. She insisted, and I mean insisted, that I take her card. And since I'm under no obligation to provide her service with the card, nor did I want it, I disposed of it in the most expedient manner available to me. I say that while gesturing at the wonderful trash receptacle. The officer then says, "That was a pretty petty thing to do. I think you should get it for her." At this point, the Karen was beaming with a smug malice at that. I told him I will under one condition. You detain both of us and then go look at the store's working parking lot camera. Once you see how we entered the lot, you can then decide who goes dumpster diving. He then raises an eyebrow at me and says, "Fine." He then takes our licenses and tells both of us to wait there. She's a bit perplexed at first, but her entitlement must have convinced her that she has to be in the right. It's not long before she begins to hiss a handful of pretty vile threats at me. I ignore her and finish filling my tank. My smiling confidence must have pissed her off, as she crept back into the driver's seat and begins talking about lawyers with Shelley. About 20 minutes later, the officer comes back, and he hands me back my license and told me I'm free to go. And before New Jersey Karen can get a word out, he very sternly rounds on her and says, "License and registration, ma'am." That made cleaning up her mess totally worth it. Guys, I absolutely love this story. It's the perfect mix of petty revenge and some malicious compliance sprinkled into one. Now she's definitely gonna be late to whatever she's going to. So about 11 years ago, my wife and I got engaged. My mother-in-law decided to gift us with an expenses-covered trip to Paris as an engagement gift. So we found ourselves spending a week in Paris enjoying the city. Also, we met up with an old friend. My friend, nicknamed Indy, was doing a postgraduate degree in Paris. We met a couple of nights and scheduled a visit to the Louvre together. The next day, we meet outside the museum. Along with Indy was his girlfriend. She was a history of arts major from Norway, and Indy was an archaeology postgrad. He has, since his preteen years, has an obsession with ancient history. This is important for the story. Also relevant to the story, my wife likes to read a lot of history books. We start the tour in the Roman section, with Indy taking the role of explaining what we were seeing. Now, because of his girlfriend, we all speak English. We then pass the Roman section, followed by Greek, stopping on the Aphrodite of Milos. In that section, Indy really took off with his explaining and getting into it. We then go up the stairs for pictures and onwards to the Renaissance section. So on the way towards the next section, we stopped in a room that had models of some of the wonders of the ancient world. One of them was a model of the Temple of Zeus in Olympia, and there was a giant statue of Zeus, made from ivory and gold. Indy stops to explain this to his girlfriend, and my wife decides to chip in about cheating in the original Olympic Games. This starts a light-hearted banter. They're talking in our native language, and I'm trying to translate to Indy's girlfriend, and then it happens. A mom behind me says, "Excuse me, what's the guide talking about?" I turn around and see a woman in her 30s and 2 boys. The older one around 8 or 9 years old, and the younger one around 6 or 7. Everything on her screams tourist. She's wearing a sundress, has a small backpack, and a guide to the Louvre. And she's got a look of stress on her face. I tell her that they're talking about cheating in the ancient Olympics. The kid one says, "Wow, they used to cheat back then?" The younger one's glued to the model, and he says, "Who's that?" pointing to the statue. Now that caught Indy's attention. Indy says, "That's Zeus, the leader of the Greek gods." Kid 2 says, "Wow!" And Kid 1 says, "Where's Mona Lisa?" Indy says, "Down this corridor. You can't miss it." Kid number 1 then asked, "Cool, can you tell us the story for that?" At this point, there's an awkward pause from everybody. The mother, a bit confused, said, "Ugh, you're not a tour guide, are you?" Indy says, "No, ma'am, I'm not." A sigh came out of the mother. She grabs her book tighter and says, "I'm sorry, you were speaking with such authority and the book is so unhelpful. We just kind of thought, that you're a tour guide." Indy responds with, "It's all right, I hope I helped. In fact, we're gonna go visit the next section if you want to follow, but I won't do the talking." My girlfriend Hannah is more apt to this period than I am. Hannah waves, smiling. Kid number 1 says, "Can we go with them, Mom? Please." She then looked at each of us trying to decide, and she says, "Well, if it's not too much trouble." Both Indy and Hannah replied, "Oh, no trouble at all." The mom then says, "But you have to be quiet and listen to these nice people." Both kids agree. They end up following us for the rest of the day, walking around the museum with either Indy or Hannah answering the kids' questions. It was lovely to see the look of amazement on their faces as we walked through the museum. The mother told us that her husband was invited to a week-long convention in Paris from his company and brought them along for vacation. She insisted on buying us lunch, which we politely declined. We settled for coffee in one of the small cafes outside the Louvre. Her husband then joins us later on. The kids asked a million questions about the exhibits during our coffee, but their true delight was they discovered that Hannah was from a country that had Vikings. So all in all, it was a great day. And there you have it, my friends. Not all I Don't Work Here lady stories have to be filled with aggressive Karens making outrageous demands. Some of you have been requesting wholesome stories here and there, and I hope this brought a smile to your face, because it sure as heck made me smile. It's just so nice to see people be kind to one another, and I absolutely love it. And you know what else I love? The fact that you guys come and hang out with me while we go through these wacky stories. So if you missed the last episode of r/I Don't Work Here lady, I'll link it right here. A racist Karen harasses a Marine, and she learns a lesson that she'll never forget. A painful lesson. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you. Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to r/Entitled People, where you'll hear stories about people who believe they can do no wrong and that rules do not apply to them. Guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day today. And in this episode, you'll hear some super entitled stories. So the stories will progressively get more entitled as we move on. And guys, seriously, the last story is super crazy. So sit back, grab a drink, because you're gonna need something to spit out when you hear how entitled some people can be. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for future stories. Oh, and Dark Fluff plushie. Guys, link in the description for all who are interested. Look how adorable he is. Anyways, guys, let's dive in. So, this story is actually from my mom from a couple of years ago. She works for customer service, taking phone calls, answering questions, and sometimes helping fix simple issues. She had started not too long ago and was one of the first few employees, so right from the start, she knew pretty much everybody who worked there, including the CEO, who she describes as a very nice, down-to-earth guy who always dressed pretty casually, so he'd blend in with everybody else pretty easily. So after a couple of months, they started to hire more people to work, including this one guy who was apparently very entitled and considered himself better than everybody else. Mom and a few others didn't like him because he was apparently very arrogant, always tried to correct others only to be wrong himself, and kept making the same mistakes. He also ignored many rules on the floor. And he also has a huge temper, and would often scream and curse at anybody who said something he did not like. The screaming a lot of the time would be something along the lines of, "Who the hell do you think you are to tell me to do etc, etc." So one day, he was apparently playing some games on his phone while at the same time talking to a customer, barely paying attention to the call, when the CEO comes in to check the floor after a meeting. Seeing the guy on his phone, the CEO walks up to him and calmly asks the guy to politely end the call with the customer and tell him that another representative would call back as soon as possible. The CEO then told the guy he wasn't allowed to have his phone out when helping a customer, as it takes away the focus on said customer. Now, this is the best part. This idiot had no idea what the CEO looked like. He thought the CEO was another employee who made calls. So cue the guy literally rolling his eyes, taking his headset off and saying, "And who the hell do you think you are to tell me how to do my damn job?" So the boss just stood there for a moment, obviously in shock, and the guy, thinking he'd won, smirked all smug, before the boss pulled a boss move. The boss replies, "Well, I just happen to be the damn CEO of this company, so I can tell you what the hell to do." The dumb guy lost the smirk and, according to my mom, went from angry bright red to pure white in about half a second. The boss then calmly asked the guy to come into his office, and everybody knew what was about to happen. As soon as he came out of the boss's office, he packed his things, did not make eye contact with anybody, and just left. He never did come back. Guys, what a way to shut down an entitled employee. Somebody who believes they can never be wrong and can never be told what to do should be canned almost immediately. I'm actually surprised he lasted as long as he did there with that crappy attitude. I'm so glad the CEO was the one to put him in his place. You can't act all high and mighty to pretty much the top dog in the company. I would have paid money to see his face go ghost white when he realized he was talking to the CEO. Oh my goodness. So, my uncle recently got remarried, and that reminded me of an incident that happened when his son was very young. Now, I used to have a very decent relationship with my uncle. He was the youngest of my dad's siblings, and born almost 15 years after my dad. Now, he was always kind of a wild child, but when he had a son, he really settled down. So, during the summer, we all head to my aunt's farm. This year, Spider-Man 3 had just come out. Now, I was still pretty young, 13 years old at the time. My cousin was about 8, being quite a bit younger than I. So we were talking about Spider-Man and how it was his favorite movie. I liked it too, so I tried to talk to him about it. He got really upset and said girls can't like Spider-Man. My cousin says I've probably never seen it, and I just roll my eyes and describe the plot to him, and he gets really mad. But for now, he simmers. Later, my cousin asked me to come outside and push him on the swing, and I do. Once again, I'm much bigger than him, so I can push him pretty high. Now, it was apparent that he had a plan to show me that he was a boy and a lot stronger than me, so when he offered to push me on the swing, I accepted. He wasn't strong enough to get me very far, and this enraged him. I tried to explain to him because I'm so much bigger than him, I weigh a lot more, but he was having none of it. Being an idiot kid, he runs off into my aunt's garage and comes back with a wooden baseball bat. He then proceeds to swing at me, and since he's so much shorter than me, he hit me clean on the thigh. The second one was not so lucky. Again, I'm much bigger than him and pissed, so I grab the bat, wrenching it from his hand. I tell him, never hit me again. And apparently I'm so scary in that moment that he runs inside and gets his dad. My uncle storms out and the following conversation happens. Uncle says, "What did you do to him? Why is he crying?" I told him, because I didn't let him hit me with a bat. Uncle responds, "And why not? He was just playing. Kids are allowed to play like that." But he hit me with a bat. So not long after that, the rest of my family came down. My dad and uncle talked, and we just went about the rest of the night normally, except I was told that I had to stay by my mom. So during the half-hour drive back to our home, my dad was pissed, and he told me that my uncle tried to have me not only just sent home, which meant the whole family would have to leave, but he wanted me banned from any family gathering from there on. The fact that my cousin admitted to everybody exactly what happened, and my uncle saw nothing wrong with it, really bothers me. My uncle was always super wary of me when I was around from then on. So listen guys, you've gotta be some crappy parent to put your kid on such a high pedestal to make him believe that he can't do wrong. The fact that OP was punished when her cousin hit her with a bat is totally outrageous. If that was me, I would have grabbed the bat and given the uncle a few whacks. But uncle, I'm just playing. I'm a kid. We're allowed to play like that. Let me hit you in the leg and then tell me it doesn't freaking hurt. Oh my goodness, that kid's gonna get such a rude awakening when he grows up. Trust me. My mother has terminal cancer, and due to financial constraints, she decided to move in with me and my family. As soon as my mother arrived here, we saw my lawyer and made her a will and designated a power of attorney. She does not want life support or anything, and she has a do not resuscitate. So my aunt, my mom's sister, decided to call me, and it got really interesting. This is how it went. So my aunt calls me and says, "Hi OP, I just wanted to see how your mom's doing because she doesn't tell me anything." I tell my aunt that she's good, same as always. My aunt then says, "Well, have you two discussed her dying wishes?" I told her, yeah, it's all taken care of. We got a lawyer and we wrote up a will. What is it that you need? She then says, "Well, when the time comes, can you call me so I can get a flight to be with her as she passes?" I tell her when time comes, I will definitely notify everybody. Don't you worry. My aunt then says, "Okay, well make sure you do everything you can do so I can be with her." I asked her, "What do you mean, like life support?" She has a do not resuscitate and doesn't want that. But as soon as it's closed, I will definitely make phone calls, and hopefully everybody can make it. My aunt goes on and then says, "I don't think you understand me. If she's passing, you need to put her on life support so I can be with her. You are power of attorney. And once she's in that state, she won't even know the difference." So at this point, I'm dumbfounded by what she just said and told her, no, that's not how that works. It's already on file with the hospital and doctors. It's signed and legalized. Even if I wanted to, I can't change her do not resuscitate request. So my aunt then says, "You are selfish. You are the most selfish, arrogant human being I've ever met. You have no idea how much I'm suffering. I just want to see your mom one last time." I told her, "You are not suffering and you need to stop. My mother has terminal cancer. She's living in a constant state of pain. You live in your own home, which is now paid off with one of your sons, his girlfriend, and their 3 kids. You're using my mother's home as your home, and you took her benefits for food, and you used it for yourself and your family. You also drove her car for 2 years and never had to pay for anything. She wanted to come here to be with me and my family. She wanted a closer bond with her granddaughter before she dies. She's choosing how she dies and where she wants to be buried." My aunt then responds, "I am recording this conversation, and I will use this as proof that you want her dead for the insurance money. The fact that you won't keep her alive is ridiculous. It's murder." Now at this point, I hung up on her before she goes full crazy, like always. I had her on speaker this entire time, and my mom listened to the entire conversation. My mother's in shock and began crying because my mother and I always had a rough relationship due to my aunt. And this is where it gets good. So my aunt calls my mom sobbing, and I mean sobbing, and begins to tell her all types of lies about the conversation. My mother quietly listened to all the blatant lies and ended the conversation just like this. She says, "So I was listening this whole time, and you were on speaker. I know everything. It's a shame you caused so much distraction between me and my only child, and for so long. I'm glad that at the end of all this, he still took me in. I've done so much for you, and now I see it's just jealousy because it wasn't all about you. When I die, I do not want you to come to his home. You can be at my burial in Mexico, but do not come here. He doesn't want you here. And he's too kind and empathetic to my disease to tell you no, but I'm going to say no. I'm sorry that this is going to be the last conversation we will ever have." And just like that, my mother hung up and blocked her number. The greatest part of this is my mother said all of this to her while drinking her morning coffee and eating her toast, without skipping a beat. I'm so glad the mom got to give the aunt a good dose of reality before she passed. Cue the mic drop. That's probably going to be in the back of her mind for the rest of her life. Imagine being so entitled that you choose when a person will leave this world. Yikes. So, I'm gonna preface this by saying that brevity is not my strong point. I'm sorry. It was hard to know what to include since there's a lot of backstory. If nothing else, writing this felt good because it was a very traumatic time, and getting it off my chest is helpful. Hopefully, nobody thinks that I'm the entitled one. Now, I hope this fits because it's about an entire entitled family. So, my fiance died very unexpectedly in 2016 at the age of 35. I was 26 years old at the time. We lived together in a very nice house on a few acres. It was almost an estate. I'd lived there for a couple of years, and he had lived there for most of his life. His grandfather had built the house, and when his grandparents died, the house was willed to their 6 kids, one of whom was his mother. When fiance's mother died, her share was willed to my fiance and his 2 siblings, so fiance was a partial owner of the home. His aunt also lived there. Now, she was mentally unstable in many ways that I won't get into, except to say that she was a serious hoarder. Consequently, the house was in disrepair. It wasn't fit to be lived in and could have easily been condemned, but it was a rough time. Please spare your judgment if you can. Fiance and I were in the process of getting an apartment when he died. Since my fiance and his aunt were the only partial owners living there, they paid all the property taxes and the repairs, etc. I also helped too after I moved in. It's not like my fiance and I were just squatting there or something. So a couple of months before my fiance died, his aunt had some health issues that resulted in her being hospitalized. After she left the hospital, she then moved into an apartment close by. And this is where the entitled family, my fiance's aunts, uncles, and cousins swooped in and started to demand that my fiance and I moved out so they could sell the property and split the money. Okay, fine. We were planning on moving anyway. They were really unrealistic about the timeline though. At one point, they insisted that since we were low income, all we needed to do was contact the government, and apparently, the government would just give us a small house and some land. That's how out of touch with reality these people were. They would just show up in the house whenever they wanted, which I guess legally was their right. But it was also very rude and entitled to just come into someone's home on a regular basis without even speaking to them while you're there, much less letting them know beforehand. Anyway, when my fiance died, they were elated. They were so happy. 2 days after he died, I was at the house collecting my things when I got a message from his sister, who's an angel by the way, saying they'd messaged his out-of-state uncle's wife, asking her to message the sister about me because God forbid anybody be direct. Apparently, they wanted me banned from the property immediately. I'm no longer allowed on the property at all, and cops will be called to arrest me immediately if I'm caught near the house. The reason being is that we had been living in sin, and now that my fiance was gone, I had no reason or right to be there. I was devastated. At that point, I wanted to take everything he'd ever touched and scoop it up and hold it close to me forever. I couldn't bear the thought of not being able to have anything of his. As an afterthought, I realized that all of my stuff was also still there. Luckily, his sister stuck up for me and said I could be there as long as I wanted. She lives across the country though, so she couldn't do much to enforce it. So, the most ridiculous display of disgusting entitlement happened a couple of days later. I was at the house, frantically trying to load up the car with everything that reminded me of my fiance, which was taxing, both physically and emotionally. I was crying when all of a sudden a cousin appeared in our bedroom. The cousin comes in smiling and says, "Hey, isn't that crazy? He died so suddenly. He was fine a few days ago. Aren't you, not supposed to be here? I was told to call the cops if you were on this property." Me, through tears, said, "Yeah, it was very unexpected. I'm just getting our stuff and I'll leave right away. There's no need to call anybody." The cousin laughs and says, "Huh, I know, I'm not dumb. I'll let you grab your stuff. Well, at least we can sell the dump now. I could use a new truck." So it's then that I hear people talking and laughing in the next room. Apparently, the cousin had brought her teenage daughter and several of her daughter's friends to gawk at the house. Our home, where we lived and loved, was being openly mocked with zero regard for my feelings. The cousin then says, "So, when do you think you'll be gone? Or do I actually have to call the police?" I told her I'm not sure. I'd love to get as much of my fiance's stuff as possible, and his sister asked me to get some of her mom's things. It was at this point she starts to frown and says, "Well, I guess I'll have to talk to his sister about that. Their mom is the reason this place is so run down, you know." She then laughs again and says, "I don't see why the sister would want any of this garbage." Now, I want to note that this is blatantly false, as the house had been in pristine condition until